So we're going to continue talking about the War of 1812. So just to recap what we talked about previous, we discussed how the War of 1812 was between the Americans and those living in British North America. It ended with the Treaty of Ghent, where all the land that was gained during the war was returned back. There really wasn't a true winner. America did not get any Canadian lands, and neither did Canada get any American lands. What else is important about the Treaty of Ghent is the establishment of the border between what we now know as Canada and the US. So going forward, things to remember about the War of 1812 is that it is considered to be one of the most defining moments in Canada's history. Those that agree that the War of 1812 was a big deal for the identity, they feel this way because it was the first time that you saw the French Canadians, the First Nations, and the British Loyalists coming together to fight the US. So in previous history, you've seen those three different groups almost fighting each other, but this was the first time that they bound together to fight off somebody else, which was eventually the US. So the first time we came together and united as a full country was the War of 1812. Without the War of 1812, we probably would not have Canada today. America would have taken over what we now know as Canada. So if you take a look, what else is important about the War of 1812 is this little line that you see here, which is the boundary between America and what we now know as Canada. There's a video here in your notes, so go ahead and click on it. It just talks about how the border was actually established. So those that don't agree that the War of 1812 was part of the Canadian identity was because it did kind of reaffirm those British identities, those things that separated them from the French and the First Nations. So the ways of life, the government, their religion, those sorts of things. After the war, Britain began to isolate the First Nations to point of reserve. So we see this even today, where you see you see First Nations living on reserves and kind of sticking to where their lands are. They also, through the War of 1812 and after, they also did consider assimilation. And we know that just from residential schools, the 60 scoops, and such forth. Here's another video for you guys, another interesting video. We're going to go into the rebellions of Upper and Low Canada next. So this is the end of chapter 6 and the start of chapter 7, if you're wondering where we are in our notes. But for now, I will leave it there.